Excellent. All right. Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you've logged in from. Great to have you at the Introduction to Gen I, a little bit of a beginner's guide webinar. It's a 1 hour session today, and we aim to have you finished within the hour. My name's Warren Dean. For those I haven't met, I've got Rajoy with me as well. So I am founder at DataTale. Rajoy is an AI specialist. He's an educator in the AI space. I'll let him introduce himself a little bit later. But if you don't know who DataTale is, essentially we are Power BI services for government. So Power BI training, Power BI report development, and we're also moving into Power BI training or in the AI space, so Gen AI training itself. But if you are interested in Power BI training, I do have 3 Power BI training courses coming up next month. So Power BI for Government, which is the introduction course, Power BI Advanced, if you've used Power BI for a little while and you want to get into Power Query, DAX, and data modeling, and Power BI data storytelling, which is all about how do I make sure that I'm answering business questions and designing my Power BI report correctly. So feel free to shoot me an email. I'll put my contact details in the Q&A chat for you. But all these courses are available next month. But what we're looking at today is Gen AI. And so obviously you're familiar with AI. It is the hot topic at the moment. And really it's a skill that can't be ignored. So AI isn't really the future. It is what's happening now. Now, if you've been reading the news, watching the news on YouTube, however you consume your news feeds, Microsoft, Google, all the big companies are changing the way they work due to AI. So these are 2 quotes from Microsoft and from Google. So Microsoft have said 20 to 30% of all their code is now AI generated. And Google says more than a quarter of all their new code is generated by AI. So this is a massive shift. You would also have noticed, not that they've said it's because of AI, but they've been reducing their workforce. So they have been, I think Microsoft dropped their workforce by 3%. Now, they didn't say this is from AI, but we can kind of put 2 and 2 together that the workplace is changing. And that's why, Rajoy and I think this is an important webinar just to understand what is Gen AI, what does it mean, what does it mean to you? And we want to look at delivering a training course in the future. And we'd love your feedback and what you think would be relevant in this course so that you can have the skills and you can know what's happening and you can adapt into these new ways of working. So in terms of the topic for our webinar today, Rajoy is going to touch on what is Gen AI. So he'll take the first part. Then he's going to talk about what's prompt engineering and why that's important when you're using these AI tools that you do the correct and efficient prompts. And then I'll be talking towards the end for AI agents. So Rajoy, I will hand over to you. This is part 1, what is Gen AI?
Hey everyone, it's honestly a pleasure to be here, and I think like Warren mentioned, it's a really important topic in the world today, especially in the workforce. A little about me: I'm an educator in the AI space, and I also build AI agents for companies. Most recently, I've built an AI agent for real estate and also for HR. So I do have a bit of expertise in AI agents and also especially with prompt engineering. So in today's webinar, we're going to focus more on what is Gen AI really, and then we'll focus on what is prompt engineering. So why does it matter today about AI? Because as Warren said in the quotes mentioned, AI is really transforming every industry. There's not a single industry where AI has not really gone into. And a lot of the workforce is really impacted by it. And some people, for instance, might be even scared, oh, is AI going to take over? But the good news there is, I think if we upskill ourselves, there is always scope for a better understanding of AI and also how we can incorporate it into our own workspaces. So that is something that's very important. So it unlocks new capabilities at your workplace. And because AI is only going to increment more and more, and it's going to take new forms in the future, learning about Gen AI and learning about AI as a whole really helps you prepare yourself for a future which is fully AI oriented. And also in the workplace, it's becoming a critical skill. So learning about AI really goes a long way in your own workplace. So what is Gen AI? So previously we've heard a lot about machine learning, we've heard a lot about artificial intelligence, but generative AI, and what does that mean? So compared to what it was before, if you look at computers, if you look at programming, computers were always meant to calculate, and they were getting better at calculations until they came up with Gen AI. And Gen AI really is generative AI. So it generates content, which it never used to do before. Before, it used to focus more on calculations, so complex mathematical calculations, graphical, and other areas. But now it can generate content based on what it is trained on. So some of this content includes text, images, audio, video, and it can also produce code. And so how this really works is generative AI over the last decade or so has been trained on massive amounts of data, and it has trained itself in order to understand there's many layers, which we'll go to in a bit. So what are some of the characteristics of a generative AI? It can produce novel outputs or original outputs. The original outputs would be based on the creativity of your prompt. And some of you might have noticed a lot of the memes going out in social media these days, a lot of them created by Gen AI. And it also sometimes produces variation of existing patterns or existing content that's available on the internet. It also requires substantial training. So there's LLM models, which we'll get into in a bit, substantial training models, and it's continuously improving. So everything that you're putting into, whether it's ChatGPT or any other Gen AI platform, what it's doing is it's using that to train its model every day, every moment, every second. And so these models, no matter how they were last year, this year, they've gotten at least 5x better. And so that is something that we can, I think, look forward to in the future. We should always brace for a much highly impactful version of Gen AI. So one of the things to remember is previously computers were used to calculate, but now computers can actually generate content, sometimes even on its own. So looking at the evolution of AI, so it really all started when they started building computers. And so initially computers were built, say, around 1950s onwards, so 1950s to the 1980s. And in that time, it was more of an if-then logic. So if this is true, then do this, or if it is not true, then do something else. So if else, and those kind of logics were more prevalent in the rules-based system. And this was between the 1950s and the 1980s. And then we have the machine learning systems between the 1980s and 2010s. And so in here, it was more learning from the data it has really collected over time. And then in 2010s, they started this concept of deep learning or neural networks, which again, we'll look at in a bit, where it actually started training the data more and more from what it had collected. And it started learning from this data. And because it had learned from this data, now generative AI in this present day and age, it can actually create content based on the context and based on the understanding that it has been trained on. And so if you recall the earliest version of ChatGPT was that was widely known was about 3.5. Again, 3.5 was trained up to a certain date, and if you recall, you couldn't get up-to-date information because the model was trained only up to a certain date. So all of that's a combination of deep learning and then moving on to generative AI. So now we have models where it is fully available with internet capabilities and also abilities to conduct research on the internet. So now it's learning at a massive pace, unlike we've ever seen before. So what are the types of generative AI? So you've got two different type of models among many. Two of the most important ones that I've picked out of large language models, LLMs, These LLM models, again, are more text-based models, and they really are based on language. So it really uses natural language processing at a massive level, at a massive scale. And so you would come across models like ChatGPT 3.5, 4, 4.0 mini, and so on. All of these are LLM models that were created and built and constantly updated over a period of time. You also have other ones that are built like Claude and Llama, Palm, etc. So all of these are large language models, which are mostly text-based. And then you have the other kind of models, which are diffusion models. Diffusion models are simply models that help you generate images. And how it helps you generate images is it uses random patterns from existing training data sets. So whether it's pictures, whether it's images, noise, videos, etc. So it could be audio as well. And so it really uses the random patterns observed in those inputs to generate diffusion models. And some of the examples here we can see you've got DALL-E, you've got Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, etc. DALL-E and Midjourney, they're highly known. They're widely known for their image generation and video generation qualities, and it's been doing its rounds on the internet, especially over the last year, at the kind of quality of images, the quality of videos that it can generate. And I think the latest version has a much higher quality, up to 10 to 15 seconds, and it's only getting better. It's getting better that now a lot of social media influencers are all using AI to generate some of their content, because the quality of the content is really good. So in terms of the different types of generative models, these are the two main things that I wanted to focus on today. Large language models, diffusion models, and each of these models have their own strengths, and there are many others as well. Each of those models have their own strengths, their own limitations, and their own use cases.
Yeah, sorry to chime in there, Roy. I was actually saw one of the influencers created a 1 hour video. So their voice, images, the text, the whole thing, all generated with GenAI. I watched it; it wasn't that interesting, but still pretty amazing.
Yeah, incredible, yeah. It can go 1 hour, and probably they start making movies at this point, which makes a lot of sense because, yeah, it's doing its rounds. Yeah, so of course, one of the most important companies and the products that we use, almost all of us here, maybe. I definitely use it in my day-to-day life in many areas, in many aspects. ChatGPT, right? So what does the GPT stand for in ChatGPT, right? So the G stands for generative, P stands for pre-trained, and T stands for transformers. So generative, as we saw earlier, Gen AI, generative, it really creates content. And the content is created based on prompts, which we'll look at in a bit. And each of these prompts are specific to what kind of output you want to create. And that's why prompt engineering is very important. And then we move on to the P, which is the pre-trained. And so, like I mentioned earlier, somewhere after the 2000s, there was so much of data that was available, especially after the internet came out in the 90s. So much of data available, so much of information out there. And so all of these models are really trained on so much of massive amounts of data. So it's pre-trained on existing data. And then you've got the transformers. The transformers is refers to something like a neural network. And if the easiest way to understand neural network would be to think of it like the brain, the human brain, and how you've got all these veins and other networks going on, and there's a signal here that sort of relates it to other things. And if you deep dive into neural network, and I won't go into detail to technically give you, to overload you with information, but the overview of a neural network, what does it mean, right? So if you look at this architecture here, you've got the input layer, right? The input layer in this instance would represent the prompts that you are putting onto ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever else. So when you put in your prompt, you put in your information or input some data, it really goes into this hidden layer, and that's the mid layer, or the logic layer, where all the magic really happens. So in this layer, you can see there are multiple of those green, and we call them nodes. Each of these nodes really talk to each other and sort of understand what the input is really, that's given to us, was given to them, and it really picks up information from there, from the training that it has received in the past. So it picks up the training, and sort of, for example, if I was to input an image of a cat and I was to ask GPT, what image is this? Or what animal is this? So it would sort of go into this hidden layer of neural networks where it would pick up, based on the training data, it would pick up different cue points. For example, okay, it's got ears, it's got eyes, it's got a nose, so clearly it must be an animal. And it's furry, so clearly it's got to be an animal. And then it sort of picks up all these other cues, and all these nodes go in working together to sort of come up with different clues, which will then be overall generated, and it will then come out to the output layer, which then comes up with the best probable answer. And so we will say, hey, I think this is a cat. So in there, each of these green nodes, you can see they have so many factors and so many parameters that go into determining what this image might actually be. So just because it has an ear, has 2 ears, a nose, and 2 eyes, doesn't mean it has to be an animal. Could be a human being, right? So it really has to use different weightage. So it could be the size of the ear, could be the size of the nose, could be the size of the eyes, the number of eyes, and other attributes that go into determining what the image might actually be. So it actually uses different parameters and weights to different parameters to then come up with the most probable answer, which might be, okay, I think this might be a cat. So that's how a neural network works. And that's pretty much also how the human brain works. So if we were to come across a chair, we would see, okay, it's got 4 legs, it's got a seat, it's got a cushion in there, it's probably got a backrest as well. Okay, this might be a chair. And because it's a chair, and in the past I've sat on multiple chairs, it might be safe to sit on this chair. So that's really how the human brain works as well. So that's why this is really called the neural networks. And overall, this is pretty much how GPTs work. So whether it's ChatGPT, Gemini, anything else, pretty much that's the overarching theme of how it works. And so this really gives rise to what my input should be. So if my prompt is not good, then whatever magic that happens in between this hidden layer is not optimal for me to get the output. So if my prompt is messed up and if I'm not being clear, then when it goes into the logic and it tries to figure out what I actually want, because it doesn't know what I actually want, and it's vague, it actually gives a very mediocre output. And so now we'll go into the prompt engineering bit of things, and we'll discuss why it is very important to know and understand prompt. Now, a lot of us, and I've come across a lot of people, so whether that's students, staff, business people, managers, a lot of people use prompts, and the most common thing that I see is people just talk to it like you would use Google, right? What is this and what is that? While it is okay, in some instances it is fine. What happens there is, because the question might be vague and it's not searching the internet for an answer, it actually needs a very crisp, a very detailed prompt to know what output you really want. So if you look at this diagram here, the prompt really goes into the AI model. And so if the prompt is not good enough, so if it's a bad prompt, you really will end up getting a mediocre output. But if you have a good prompt, then you actually get the output that you want. And so if it's a bad prompt, the mediocre output is just going to keep going back to prompts. You're going to keep typing. You're going to keep asking questions, and sometimes it's going to give you random answers that you never asked for, never expected. And so a lot of times when people complain, oh, AI, I know it's really great, but I don't think it does what it's supposed to do, and it's definitely not as powerful as it seems. It's mostly because the prompt is not good enough. And so it's not really because the AI model hasn't trained itself and it's not powerful enough. It's more because the prompt isn't helping the AI come up with the answer that you expect. So in this section here, we're looking at prompt engineering. It's really an art. It's really a science. There's a lot of science that goes behind how to write a prompt. And initially, when I learned programming, one of the main things that I recall is that when you do programming, you're really communicating with the computer, and it converts the program into binary, zeros and ones, and so that goes into computer understanding language. And it's gone to a point now where we are doing the same thing, but you don't need to know programming. What we're really doing is talking in our own language to the AI model, which can understand what we're saying. And so because it can understand what we're saying, we need to be very careful or very precise with what we're saying so that it can do what we want it to do. And so we're really bridging the intention, what we have, the intention of our, the reason behind why we're using the AI model, so that the machine can understand and produce the answer that we're actually looking for.
Just to give an example of that, so I was obviously, as a Power BI programmer, I was working on some DAX code for a client yesterday, and I was being lazy with my prompts, and I was just dropping in some code and going do this, and just like what Joe mentioned, I was going around and I had to keep clarifying the prompts and I just kept going in circles. Whereas if I had have put a more clear prompt, more descriptive, given the relationships of the tables, talked about what I actually wanted, I wouldn't have kept going in circles, and I would have got something more useful quicker, if that's what you mean there, Rejoy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think we're going to go through some of those examples in a bit of prompt engineering techniques and other commonly used mistakes when people do prompts. So we'll definitely touch base on that in a bit. But before we go to the examples, I just want to give a few techniques that you can think of when you are writing a prompt. So there are multiple types. Some of them here I've listed. There's zero-shot prompting. So zero-shot prompting is direct instructions. So you just know examples. So for example, you would say something like, what degree should my meat be cooked for? Or something like, what is, it could be a simple calculation as well, or like Warren said, could be a DAX, question, something more technical, but it's a direct question without any example, without any context, without any background. So that's a zero-shot prompting. And then you've got few-shot prompting. So in few-shot prompting, you're giving some sort of examples of the desired behavior. For example, you would say something like, give me the temperature of cooked meat when it's in the oven. For example, when I cook meat at 20 degrees Celsius, how much time will it take to cook the meat fully? So that is giving an example of what you're actually expecting. And that would be your few-shot prompting. And then you've got chain of thought prompting. And chain of thought prompting, again, widely used, encouraging a step-by-step reasoning. So you would really ask it to walk you through the thought process and where you're going, why you're going, and it would give you a detailed explanation of what it's doing and why it's doing. So some places where this might be very useful is mathematical calculations or formulas. You could always use the chain of thought prompting. And then you've got the React framework where using alternate reasoning and action steps. So give me other reasons for why this is the case or that is the case, things like that. So we'll look at some examples in the next few slides. So zero-shot example would be explain quantum computing to a 10-year-old. Now, while that might be a genuinely good prompt, the issue there is we don't know or we don't understand what is the context behind this. It could be from a school context, it could be from a textbook context, because GPT doesn't really know the context, the kind of output that it will give will be slightly different from what you might be expecting. Another example is few-shot example. So in there, you're classifying. So I love this product, and the sentiment there is positive. So you're giving an example there of what you think would be a positive sentiment, and what would be a negative sentiment, and what would be just a regular sentiment. And then you have the chain of thought example where you're really thinking step by step to solve a problem. So you're actually giving the problem and you're asking other ChatGPT, you're asking a GPT to really explain it step by step. So the output that it will then give is it will walk you through every aspect of how it's thinking and why it's thinking and why 2 times 2 is 4 and how 2 plus 5 is 7. So it will really walk you through each of those examples step by step, so you won't have any confusion at the end when you do get that answer. So these are just some of the prompt engineering techniques that you can follow. And we'll deep dive into how we can actually build an effective prompt. So one of the first things you need to ensure is to be very clear and specific. So what exactly is your task? and you want to know what is the desired format, and you also want to give what it should and shouldn't give you. You would also want to give it the right context, so background information of why you're asking it to do what it's doing. You don't need to go full detail. You don't need to write a full essay on what the context is, but you would want to give a very brief context. And we'll look at an example in the next slide, but you want to give a good brief context of the intention and the goal, and who your audience might be. And one of the other important things is to set the role of the GPT. So each time you start a new chat, you want to define who the AI should act as, because then it takes the role of that particular person. So you can say something like, you're a teacher, you're a year 3 teacher who's proficient in mathematics. So it would assume the role of a year 3 teacher that is proficient in mathematics. And then when you give all those contexts, it's actually going to spew out information and data and context that you never really would have gotten otherwise. So we'll look at an example in the next slide of how do we create a proper prompt. So in here, we're following a structure, and this might be very useful for most of you if you're taking notes. So first is what needs to be done. So what are you really looking for? And then the next part is your background information. And then how to approach the task. So in some instances, we might not really know how to approach the task, which is why we're actually on ChatGPT or GPT for that matter. So in that instance, it's okay to allow ChatGPT to say, hey, choose the most appropriate task. And that's where choosing the role is very important. So if the role is not assumed, then it wouldn't know how to approach the task. So for instance, if you're a scientist and you want to look at researching DNA, or in this instance, like Warren said, you're a Power BI expert and you want to know how to write DAX code, giving that instruction or giving that role as, hey, you are proficient in Power BI, you are an expert in DAX programming, it assigns that role to itself. And therefore, when it gives you the result, it is so much more high. It's not high level, it's in detail and very specific for GPT to give you that response. The bottom 3, you don't necessarily need to in all of your prompts, but in some instances, in some points, you might need to give some examples like, hey, I'm looking for something like this. Or you could say, I want your result to be in a tabular form. Or you can say as a table, as a PDF, as a Word document. And you can say something like your limitations, which will make sense in the next slide. As you look at a full-fledged prompt structure. So if you look at this, I've really put in each of the points that we spoke about into an actual prompt. So this whole thing is one prompt. So if you look at the context here, I'm a 35-year-old athlete looking to improve recovery after workout. So that is the context of what I'm saying. And then I'm giving it the task, create a 7-day meal plan focusing on post-workout nutrition. And then the instruction is include breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks, specify ingredients, preparation time, and nutritional benefits. And the constraints that I have here is no soy products, and the preparation time should be under 30 minutes, and all of the meals must be vegan. And finally, the format would then be present a plan in a daily table format with meal names, ingredients, and the brief preparation instructions. So one of the things that you could add here is the role that you wanted to play. So you can add the role saying, assume that you are a dietitian who is proficient in dealing with recovery for athletes, and so this prompt would then be so powerful that it would give you exactly what you want, because you have given all the detailed information that it requires to give you the input that you need. So this entirely would be a great prompt structure for you to follow. Some of the other prompt patterns that we can see, so one is persona-based prompting, which is assigning really what we were talking before, assigning specific roles to the AI. And then there's decomposition, breaking complex tasks into smaller steps. And that's, again, very important if you're doing something more technical. You can always give it a major task and say, split this into each task, and you can focus onto every step of the way before you move on to the next task. So that could be like if you're reading a book and you want to, like maybe a textbook might be the Power BI, Microsoft Power BI book, which you don't understand certain chapters. So what that could look like is focusing fully on that first chapter, because you're breaking that down, breaking every page down, breaking every word down into smaller segments, understanding it fully and deeply, and then you can move on to different steps. And then you've got the recursive refinement, so iteratively improving outputs. So again, sometimes your prompts might require further information, because when AI is giving you the output, there might be times where you didn't even realize that you needed to do something or you needed to add this. And so because AI is very, very smart, it when it gives you the output, might even ask you, hey, would you recommend I do this for you? And so you can then write your next prompt to be specific to that. So it's always iteratively improving. And then you've got the self-evaluation model. So in here, you're really asking the model to critique its own work. So once it gives you the model, gives you a response, you don't always have to just take that. And I'm sure if you've used ChatGPT, you'd see at the bottom, always, recheck the responses to make sure the result is accurate, because ChatGPT might make errors. So using it to critique its own work is really it's really a foolproof way to get the right answer, especially when you're not really confident, if you're not really a subject matter expert in that area. So you could do this for, say, writing emails, for really any of your day-to-day work as well. You could really go down into critiquing each of the responses that AI is giving. And then you have instruction chaining, so connecting multiple prompts in sequence. So you can create the same prompt, you can have multiple prompts that are added to this as well. And then you've got constraint generation, so setting explicit boundaries and rules, what it should do and what it shouldn't do. Like, for instance, sometimes when you're training, and we'll look at this in the AI agent space. So sometimes when you're creating an AI agent, people might ask questions that are outside of that particular instance. So for instance, if I was creating an AI agent for the weather, right? So most of my questions will be surrounding, is it going to rain today? Is it sunny today? What might be the times when it's going to rain? Questions like that. But in that situation, if I'm going to get a user who's going to ask about food, what kind of food should I have? That's really outside of that particular AI agent's space, and it shouldn't be answering those questions. And so in that instance, setting explicit boundaries by saying you will not answer questions that are outside of relevance from this space is another foolproof way to ensure that the AI sticks to the rules and instructions that you have given and doesn't go outside. And some of the issues that this brings is that it creates models that might eventually hallucinate. So we want to avoid all of the other things that it can. So the more vague your prompts are, the more vague your instructions are, the more it will go out of proportion and might start saying things that you didn't expect it to say. So we'll look some of the examples here for the advanced prompting. So persona example, again, we looked at this earlier. So as an experienced cybersecurity expert, analyze these network logs and identify potential security threats. So I'm giving it the role of a cybersecurity expert. And then you've got the decomposition expert example. So summarize the key arguments in this essay and evaluate the strength of each argument. So it goes step by step and takes each of the arguments in full detail and then looks at this and gives you the output in a more detailed way. And then you've got the self-evaluation example where you're writing a product description for a smart water bottle, for example. So then you're critically analyzing, you're reviewing each of the description and suggestion, and it is going to suggest improvements, which you can then decide if you want that improvement or not. So those are some of the examples of advanced prompting patterns. So we look at transforming prompts. So how can we tell a weak prompt from a strong prompt? So if we look here at the example, tell me about climate change. The problem here is it's too vague and there's no specificity. There's no context. There's no format of how it should present the output. There's no guidance, no purpose at all whatsoever. But if you look at a strong prompt, what it should be, you've got as a climate scientist communicating to high school students. Over there, you are giving it the role. You're also giving it the audience. And you're then saying, explain 3 most significant impacts of climate change on marine ecosystems. So over here, it's going to give you a very specific outcome as opposed to just talking about climate change. And you can see towards the end, we're saying format your response as a bulleted list with clear headings and limit to 300 words. See, the good thing with that prompt is very strong because it is so detailed into exactly what you want it to do. And that is why that is such a strong prompt. So we look at other examples of different prompts and how people really use prompting in a very ineffective way. So for example, if you were to use a pattern or role assignment. In this example, an ineffective example would be just tell me about data privacy laws. And you can see from that example how it could be anything. The audience could be anyone. And so what it's really going to generate at that point is just going to take data privacy laws from all over the place. But an effective example would be by giving it a role as an experienced data privacy lawyer and explain the key differences between certain topics. And so that and then eventually we're also saying for a technology startup planning to launch in both Europe and California. So we're giving it a particular area, giving a particular place. And so we will then take laws and regulations for that place. And because it has assigned this role of an experienced data privacy lawyer, it's going to be very specific in its output. This is the chain of thought pattern, and this is really helpful in math problems, logic, multi-step reasonings, and sometimes even decision processes. So there was a time I remember when I wanted to change the tires of my car, and I just wanted to, I've went to a shop and they gave me all of these brands to choose from, and I didn't really know what to do. So I went to ChatGPT and I gave it this full prompt. And it gave me the pros and cons of each and every brand of tire and the different models that they use and which is better for which condition. So it was so specific in a full tabular column that it really gave me the best information that I could have ever used to finally make my decision. So it's very effective for a decision process because you're really understanding the thought behind why ChatGPT is giving you these responses. So you can see the ineffective example is just asking what the question is. But if you don't tell it to give you a step-by-step process, then it's not going to tell you how it's thinking. It's just going to give you the answer. And more often than not, you're going to wonder why it came to that conclusion or why it gave you that answer. So it's very, very important to have a very good, strong prompt. And it's also important to know at which point what prompt is more powerful. So this will be the task decomposition. So here you can see when you're giving it something big, a massive task to do, you're giving it steps of how you want it to proceed. So first, summarize the key metrics. Secondly, identify the top 3 strengths and weaknesses. And so when you do this, it is so much easier to then go back and critique each and every one of these points. So if you want to go back and critique point 1, then you can go and deal with that fully and then come back to point 2 and so on. So this in itself will help you come up with such a strong output without having a vague response to what it can do.
Yeah, sorry, Joe. So this is a good example that I was using yesterday because I actually had to go into my DAX code that I was writing and then go, step by step, show me what each piece of the code is doing so that I could work out where the actual error was because I couldn't work out the error as a whole. I had to step into the code at each step, and then I was able to figure out, oh, it's this particular part of the code.
Yeah, and it's a really great opportunity to learn, especially while coding. And I tell a lot of my friends and sometimes even family, when you're writing code, you can actually go through line by line. So even if you're someone who has no idea of coding, but you want to learn, you can always take large chunks of code and really just go through it line by line, and it will explain each function in depth. So that is a really great way to learn and also get your desired output. So yes, best practices. So what you should do and what you shouldn't do. So I'm sure from all these examples, one thing is pretty clear that you need to be very specific and detailed in what you want to do. You want to have clear, concise language. You want to know what kind of format you want. You want to, you want to break down complex tasks into smaller steps. So those are all the do's. And so the opposite of this would be true. Don't be vague. Don't contradict your statements or requirements. Don't use massive jargons without an explanation. Don't just give excessively long prompts that will dilute the very essence of what you're expecting it to produce. So be very careful with the do's and don'ts. Make sure your prompts are following these structures that we've mentioned. And also remember, prompt engineering is iterative. So while you might put the first prompt and it might give you some things, like I said, because it's iterative, you want to keep going back with strong prompts that will make it narrow it down to give you a much more stronger outcome than just having a vague response. Some of the ethical considerations, and this is very important because a lot of us use AI in our everyday space. So one of the things is bias and fairness. So obviously we need to make sure that we understand that because this is trained on some sort of pre-training data set, there might be some sort of bias and there might be some sort of fairness in place. And the other thing is when we're using ChatGPT, especially at work or other areas when we're publishing stuff, we want to make sure that we're giving the right content attribution because there could be copyrights and could be other issues, especially these days when AI is really picking up things from the internet. So a lot of what other people have worked on might be things that AI picks up in its response. So it's very important to attribute that you have AI generated content, and also beware of misinformation. Sometimes AI could hallucinate and could give you information that doesn't really exist. So unless you know for a fact and you verified the response and you know that this is fully what is true and what is present out there in the internet or wherever else, unless it's verifiable, make sure that you don't fall for misinformation. And obviously, privacy concerns are one of the major concerns in the world today. So when you're putting in your pictures, when you're putting in any personal information, please know that, and especially it might not just be your information, it could be other people's information, like maybe a photograph or something. So please make sure that you don't put in other people's information in there without their consent, and also make sure that you're informing the people when you're using their data.
Just a funny example of hallucinations. I was asking ChatGPT for a quote. I was doing a presentation and I wanted a quote from a particular, well-known person. And so it gave me some quote options. I jumped on Google and verified the quotes, but they didn't exist. So it had made up these quotes and attributed them to people. And I asked ChatGPT, I said, why are you doing this? Why have you given me fake results? And in essence, what it said was, I didn't want to disappoint you and I don't want to lose my job, so I kind of made it up. So be careful. Do check what ChatGPT gives you back.
Yeah, and just to add to that point, that's why prompt engineering is very important because sometimes when it's extremely vague, it could just go and give you some random information because again, it doesn't want to disappoint you. But that's where prompt engineering comes in. So the more powerful your prompt is, the more accurate the information is going to be because you're giving it the place, the resources, and the other things required for it to give you the response that you wanted to have. Yeah, so that's something that you need to keep in mind. Again, let's all be responsible. So we want to avoid harmful content generation and you want to test for misuse. You want to respect copyright and attribution, and you want to disclose that you have used AI and to generate the content or generate material, whatever that might be. And also you want to validate outputs, like we just discussed earlier. So we need to be very responsible when we are using Gen AI, especially today. Yeah. Yeah, so the key takeaways, clearly we can see generative AI is transformative. It's getting better and it's only going to get exponentially better over the next few years. And so prompt engineering is really a critical skill because of that. If you look, if a simple example I can give you is if you look at the older generation, they didn't know how to use the internet, and so they really struggled. And so our generation now really needs to know how to use AI or GPTs. And so if we don't know that, then we'll really struggle when all of this comes into fruition. So critical, it's a really critical skill, especially in the workplace. And really knowing how to prompt engineer and give really good prompts and know how to use AI really gives you a mastery that not many people have in the world today. So that is something that should be considered. And obviously, let's be ethically sound and responsible when we're using AI. So there's some of the takeaways that we can take from this
particular CRM. And so that's where we're moving in terms of AI agents. And why this is important for you and obviously for us and with a government focus is chatbots are great for FAQs, but agents take it a little bit further. So an agent can build the report. It can actually complete the request. It can fill out the form and pass those details on. So AI agents, they don't just talk. They think, they plan, and they act for you, and they can do that while you're asleep. So you don't have to prompt them every time. And so what we want to do is, I suppose, upskill you in terms of how to create an AI agent. So Rajoy and I are in the process of building a beginner course. I've put a link in the Q&A if you are interested in finding out more information. It's still in the process, and we would love your feedback in terms of what you think is important in a particular course like this, or if you want to attend, please pass us your details, and we can, as we're iterating through this course, get feedback from you as well. So in terms of the course, what we want to build is, a chat bot based on GenAI that you could deploy to a website, give it some basic FAQs. You're not going to need how to code. We're going to show you how you can do it all with GenAI. And we want to build it in the Azure workspace so that it is sovereignty compliant. So we don't want data, leaving Australia and going outside. So there's a QR code there. The link is in the chat as well. But what I'll do is Rajoy's made a very rough demo just to show you what something you would build in this course. So Rajoy, if you want to take over the screen, if you want to give us that demo.
Yeah. Are you able to see my screen?
Yep.
Amazing. Right. So this is obviously a very demo council, government-based council. You can see it's not really got any real information in there. So I've built this. I'm going to start this new chat. So here, this is an AI agent. So you can see here, this is Laura from Leaf Council Customer Support. So it's essentially a customer support tool. And so if I'm a customer going onto a council website, but I can't really find the information that I want to find, like Warren suggested earlier, a chatbot would just be able to have information, and it's only that information that it can give out. But in an AI agent, it really helps you do a bit more. But in terms of a demo, we've just built a rough model of what you will be building when you do join this training. So for instance, if I'm going to ask when or what day is my bin collection? So then it would ask me for a postcode, and then I can say, okay, I'm in this particular postcode, and then it's going to tell me a bit more information. Okay, so there you go. So bin collection days on Mondays, as you live in 3002 postcode area. Just a reminder to place your bins at the curb by 6 a.m. on the collection day or the night before is recommended. So it's not just information about what I just want. It's also giving me some additional information, which really sounds pretty good. I can also ask, what about pet registration? And so it's a really vague request that I have. What about pet registration? But over here, you can see it's going to tell me what information I really need in order to look into pet registration. So here it says you can also register your pet by calling a customer service or visiting the council in person. So I'm going to say I have a dog. And we'll see what it says. For registering your dog, you need to have the same steps as mentioned above, and I also need the information that will be handy for me. So how old is my dog? What size is my dog? Is it going to be small, medium, or large? And what's the breed of my dog? So I'm going to say my dog is 2 years, miniature poodle, and small. So you can see here, and again, this is just a demo, but what an AI agent would essentially do is it would pass on this information to a database and then use that to sort of create either a request or actually do it for me with the information that I provide. So there are other things that you can do. Talk about what about hard waste collection. So you can really ask it almost any question that you have on your council website, or additional information that you have, and it will give you information. It will give you what are the key things that you need to look out for. Whether it's I need to fill a form, or whether I need to go to the website, I need to contact someone. You can have that onto your AI agent. And now AI agents are the way, and as of today, it can actually make phone calls, and it can actually call on behalf of you and say, hey, this is what it is. And it has enough knowledge to actually do the action for you, make the phone call and actually talk like a human. So you wouldn't feel like we're talking to an AI person. So that's really, what you would be doing when you do join this course. We'll teach you how to create an AI agent. We'll teach you how to, you wouldn't need to know how to code because most of this is, again, AI, so it knows what it needs to do. But yeah, I would strongly encourage any of you, if you are interested in the AI space, looking into AI agent. It really is the next generation. It really is the next big thing in the world.
So what happens, Rejoy, if you ask it something like irrelevant to a council?
So for instance, if I ask, what is the weather today? So you can see here, it doesn't go outside. So there is a boundary in place here. It doesn't go outside of the council related information. They can't provide weather information. However, you can check the weather website or app for latest updates. You can also say, I'm really frustrated. I'm really frustrated with my day today. So you can see how it's actually understanding of what you're doing and how you're feeling. And in this instance, it really thinks the Leaf Council may have, if there might be any issues related to Leaf Council, which is why you're frustrated. So you can say, "No, I'm just having a terrible day." So in some instances, it's very understanding of the customer, very understanding of the tone. It can understand, if you're really angry, you're very happy, you're satisfied, you're not satisfied. So it's really way more than what a traditional chatbot can do. And so yeah, that's why we're transitioning from what is called as a chatbot to an AI agent. So it's really powerful and it's really fun. There's so much more advanced things that it can do, which is what Warren briefly touched upon. But yes, in this particular course, we will teach you how to do some of these fancy things.
Yeah, brilliant. I will take over the screen. So yeah, thanks for that, Rejoy. And again, that was just a mock demo. I've put the link in the Q&A. So if you do want to have a play around with it and see how it goes, but what we want to do is essentially, give you the skills to have a go and at least understand what it's doing. You don't need to know how to code. If you want to fill in that link to just give us your details, we'd love to know what you'd like to learn from an AI agent, or I suppose another example, if you would like us to build something for you in this space, Rejoy and I, just reach out and we can talk to you. Rejoy has built a few of these solutions already, but I suppose the advantage of a GenAI chatbot is it can actually connect to systems and do those tasks for you rather than just passing on details. So we hope you've got a lot out of the session. I hope at least a better understanding of prompt engineering and how you can make that work for you. But thank you again for coming along. Really appreciate your time. My details are there. You've got my email. Reach out. Love to hear from you. But we wish you all the best in your Gen AI journey. So thanks, everyone. We'll see you along next time, maybe one of the Power BI events that we'll be running soon. So thanks, everyone. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, everyone.